Hello and welcome to this quick guide on how to use the advanced gear shift and gear ratio calculator. So very quickly I'm going to go through the data that you need to provide, what kind of outputs you can expect the tool to produce, how that works with the solver in case you've not used that before, and help you basically think about the optimum gear ratios in terms of the track, in terms of the weather, and in terms of your racing car specifically. The aim of the tool is to show you an optimum solution, but really in practice you're going to want to use this as a kind of iterative tool. So you're going to be able, if you can change your ratios, you're going to want to be able to tweak those, or you're going to want to tweak those such that you get the most, not only the most optimum for driving in a straight line, but the most sensible for driving on your particular track. And by sensible, I mean you don't want to be changing gear mid-corner, and you don't want to be changing up right at the end of a long straight, or so, just before you're about to brake and that kind of thing. So what this is going to do is give you like a vanilla optimum, and then you can also use this to further refine that with the track information down here to then just really hone in the most sensible set of gears and the most sensible ratio for your given race or your given track. So without further ado, I'm just going to give you a quick example of exactly what you can do when it's all set up. So this is all set up with some existing ratios, some car information, some tyre information, the engine information, which is now in Newton meters only, some environmental track conditions, the temperature and how high it is above sea level, and some information about the track itself here as well. So what you end up doing is you just click on solver, press solve, and if you watch down the bottom here, gives lots of beeps and such like. That has now given me an optimum gear pack, and you can see that because you get these crazy set of ratios here. I tend to put this back to a number like that so you can get something out, some idea in your head of what's going on. It will keep on overriding that, unfortunately, but that is Excel. So here you now have a set of gear ratios you can do something with. So let's have a look at some of the outputs, because you want to be able to judge whether these are any good. Okay, so there's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can look at how good these are in terms of your track, how good these are in terms of how much grip you've got, and how good these are in terms of your sort of Vmax, how fast you can actually go if you had maximum power all the time. One of the major theories here is, if you see this curved line down here, it shows you this theoretical maximum. And so what that means is, if you had peak power all the way through your rev range, what would your acceleration, what's the maximum acceleration you could have, assuming you had a constantly variable transmission ratio? Okay, so that this line provides like a frontier. This is sort of your target, and the gears, you can see, try to match that as quickly, as closely as possible all the way through. There's a bit of information over here in terms of the optimization, and what I've actually done is I've tried to calculate here. See these little gaps? Yeah, these little gaps. What I've tried to do here is calculate the size of those gaps. And then what the solver does is actually tries to adjust the gear ratios here to minimize those gaps all the way through the speed profile. So just bear that in mind with what it's doing. That's how it kind of goes about doing this. It's also why it's really difficult for you to do it without calculations, and perhaps why you've got in all sorts of trouble otherwise. The thing that's going on here is it doesn't consider how much grip you've got. So you have this, the concept of a traction limit in terms of wheel spin and such like. So that's what we've got here. Now that's in this spreadsheet, that's calculated in a very, very simplistic way. You can have a look at how that's done in the gear ratio section. There are a number of ways of calculating that limit, and particularly if you have a car with a lot of aerodynamics, this traction limit is not flat. In fact, it sort of curls up as you get more load generated on the rear wheels, or typically if it's a rear drive Formula car, for example, you have more load onto the rear wheels, and that will give you effectively more grip. So your traction limit actually increases with speed. In this car, it hasn't got any drag, and it's hasn't got any downforce, and it's super basic. So I've just done this effectively a linear calculation, but just bearing in mind that this is quite a key area to consider when you're looking at your ratio optimization, and it's something we can try and manage in the solver in a minute. So basically, any time that this line goes above the traction limit, you're going to be wheel spinning. So this effectively creates like a natural limit on how fast you can accelerate. Now, in actual fact, you want this in first gear for a launch, so you can actually control the amount of torque that you deliver to the wheels all the way through with the throttle. But it's not necessarily something you're after in second, third, fourth, fifth gears. So we'll cover that in a minute. So one of the things that does raise is how, whilst it's a very objective thing we're trying to do, what is the optimum gear ratios, there are increasingly subjective elements that come into it. So whether you're okay with this wheel spinning in second gear, for example, maybe you may not want to worry about that, so you may want to drop this down a bit or whatever. So we'll come on that in a minute. The other end here is this calculation here. So we've calculated the theoretical maximum speed. In this case, all the numbers here are metric. So the theoretical maximum speed for the car given its aerodynamic profile. So you've got its frontal area over here and its coefficient of drag, and there's calculations again behind here which you can look at, which consider the air density and such like. So you can work out, right, okay, for a given maximum power, which is here, for a given maximum power, this is where you put your torque in, that's your maximum power there. So for a given maximum power and that profile of car, what is the top speed? And so we've calculated here, or I've calculated it to be 176 kilometers an hour. So no matter what gearing you have, that's as fast as you can go. However, it might be that the track you're on doesn't allow you to get up to the car's maximum speed, and in fact it might be that you top out a bit earlier. So what I've got here is a track profile. So what you do is you put in this section here the lowest speed at the beginning of a straight, and then the maximum speed when you get to the end of the straight. Now I do appreciate this is a little bit iterative, so when you change your ratios, these speeds may change as well. But this is just to give you an idea for the time being in terms of how important the Vmax is, and this traction threshold and such like. What it will also do is it tells you, if you put in each straight the Vmin and the Vmax. Okay, so if you looked at any data, you know the normal sawtooth. So just read it off the chart for any data with your car or representative car at that track. Put those in. You've got up to 8 straights. Okay, and these just plot down here, and you can see, right, okay, it's automatically pulling out the track Vmax and the track Vmin, and you can therefore optimize your gears in this zone here. Okay, so you can think, okay, so what we've got like, so we're going to move first gear up to this line, second gear between this one and this one, third gear between that one and that one, fourth gear between, and then fifth gear onwards. So what's actually happened here? So the maximum speed for the track is, I don't know if you can see that, but it's 165 kilometers an hour. So whilst our car is capable of going 176 kilometers an hour, the fastest speed we're likely to get on the track is 165. So therefore, the optimum gear ratios would be reduced down, shorter, because we're never going to see 176. So you can have a shorter set of ratios that are more focused in more of the area that you're going to actually be driving in. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So whilst we've got this tool which notionally optimizes your gear ratios for a given car going in a straight line, what we're also trying to do is refine those ratios given the context of the track and given the context of some of your preferences in terms of when you want to change gear, and given the preferences of this area here in terms of the traction limits and such like. So hopefully that will give you a bit of an idea. If I change this here, this track limit, so say we could actually go a bit quicker. So say we could make on that long straight on, we actually made it to 176 kilometers an hour, for example, Vmax. These ratios can now be further optimized. So let's have another go. So go to data, solver. Now, if you haven't got solver, you just need to enable it in Excel. And so if you search in Google, enable solver add-on, and it will pop up here on the data tab. Okay, so click that. Now I've set this up. I've set this up with in the following way. So what we're trying to do here, there's a cell down there which is all these little areas that I've told you about. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is minimize that number because it's the area between the first and second and third, fourth. Yeah, so it adds them all up, and you get this 4,000, in this case 4,070. The number doesn't really matter. You're just trying to make it as small as possible. Okay, so that's the target. And the way in which it does that is by changing the cells. So these cells here are these ones, yeah. So you can see D7 to 12, which is this lot. Okay. Now what I've also done is I've added a few constraints. So the solver is not super sophisticated. It's Excel. Okay. So you need to give it a bit of a hand, and it does get upset sometimes, and you do have to give it a hand every now and again. But these kind of figures work all right. So if you if they've not transferred over, have a look at this and copy these ones in. So basically what I'm saying here is the minimum of any gear ratio has got to be 0.5, because sometimes it puts 0 in and it gets really upset. And then the other thing, for the final drive, I'm saying in this particular case the maximum is 4.5. Now you could get sophisticated, and if you had limits and you had certain gear clusters and such like, you could put all of those in here. It's up to you. This is all here principally to get it to run, rather than for any particular optimization or any particular sort of specific gear limitations that we've got. So what I'm also going to do, so I'm going to run that. So all we've done is we've changed the top speed that we're capable of looking at. So if I solve for that, you should see it. I'm doing it live. I mean, hopefully it works. It does. So can you see that it's all kind of moved up a little bit, right? So we've got shifted a little bit further up because now we're going a bit quicker. And remember, it's still going to give you all of your nice gear changes. And unlike the example when I first started with this sheet where we had different change points for each gear, this is actually also optimized, a really nice consistent RPM change for both up and down RPM all the way through the rev range. So that is another benefit of doing this. So kind of when it's like that, you kind of know you're on the right track. So that's good. So we've got first gear, second gear. So what I've also got here is another little tweak, and this is the the peak basically. You can set the peak for first gear. So if you put this too low, it gets really upset, and this car chart goes right way up there, and effectively it'll be undrivable. So this is another little tweak you can do for first for first gear. And now, so if I change that to say 45 kilometers an hour, right? So I'm saying actually I want to, even though my track is, I want to just pull that first gear down a bit, because I don't really want to be going into second. Can you see how it's like second and third, and I'm kind of teetering, like technically on this coming up to the beginning of straight one, I should be in second gear, but then I'm going to change straight away. So I'm just going to like do a little tweak there and give that a go, and then you should see that everything's moved a little bit nicely. Okay, yeah. So now basically I'm going to drive this whole track in third, fourth, third, fourth, and fifth. So I'm going to get up to speed, first, second, and then do the rest of the track in third, fourth, and fifth. Which kind of, it's going to make my drivers happy doing that. And so just double check that, these all sort of make sense and they look okay. So the other thing that's happened here though is this has really gone quite aggressive on the wheel spin, and it's effectively what it's saying is you need to change gear when you're still controlling the wheel spin in first gear. So what you can also do is add another constraint into the solver, and what we've got here is the maximum newtons in second gear, which is that peak, and then the traction limit. And so what I sort of say is, well, add this constraint where I don't want that limit to be higher than the traction limit. Now again, this is something you can manipulate to your to suit your preferences. But there you go, here's another another solution. It kind of screws a bit with the shifts, but at least you get the optimum shift still there. And look, you can see, okay, so I'm moving here, so I know that I can be managing wheel spin in first gear, but I'm really not going to have to worry about it too much in second. And then here we go for the rest of the thing. So yes, there's a couple of occasions here where I technically should be dipping into second gear, particularly this first one. So maybe we want to go around the houses again with that optimization. It's up to you. But hopefully you can see we're tweaking these kind of real world parameters, and every time we're getting this cluster set coming out at the other end. And that is really what you want to do. So these are the values you'd take and you'd create. Now if you're in a simulator or something, you can obviously put in whatever you want. If you have a real car, then you'll be limited on these, but you might want to you'll know that these are the closest that are going to kind of make sense for the optimum. Okay, so just another couple of things that are slightly different to the other sheet. So you've got the tire size from before. You've got this friction thing. Again, this is super simplified, and it helps us with the traction limit. Effectively, it's the tire friction on the road. The boundary is basically between 1 and 2 for this. So I've chosen sort of 1.6 because this particular car's got some nice sticky semi-slick tires. But if you've got a road car, for example, you know road car tires, it's going to be much closer to 1. And if you've got proper full slick tires, it's going to be 2 or thereabouts, I would suggest, to get sensible figures. So I don't know if you just change that. Okay, you can see like the traction limit goes right down. So you can see, like, if I put some sort of fairly rubbish road tires on, at the moment we're going to be wheel spinning like all the way up until over 100 kilometers an hour. Okay, so that's another good reason to put some good tires on at 1.5, 1.6. Doesn't matter too much. The other thing we've got going on here is the coefficient of drag. So this particular car is rubbish notionally in terms of its drag. This is the coefficient of drag ratio. Again, it goes from sort of 0.3 for a normal kind of road car, or a good one, all the way up to these kind of figures for sort of a poorly aerodynamic racing car. I wouldn't normally expect it to be much higher than that, maybe 1.8, maybe 0.8 or something, but this is really the sort of top end, worst case. But say you did make an aerodynamic improvement on your car and you changed it and you got the figures back from the wind tunnel and you've gone from 0.75 to 0.7. If you look at the Vmax here, change it to 0.7, you can see the Vmax has gone up, so 4 kilometers. So that's, so it's worth having. Not quite as significant as people sort of worry about in terms of their aerodynamics, which is why the Formula One guys prioritise downforce over drag, to be honest. But anyway, so I'll put it back to 0.75, so that's pretty representative. So the other thing here is you'll recognise these from before. So what I've done, all the calculations are now coming off this torque in Newton meters. So I've put in, you've still got the option to put in your torque in pound feet, but just make sure that if you do put it in pound feet, it will calculate the newtons. But if you do want to put newtons in, make sure you put them in that column, or newton meters. So the other thing that you might want to consider is the air temperature. Now again, this is more sort of practical stuff. I'm not sure in the world of simulation how much they really account for this kind of thing, but in the real world, these things can make a difference. So the defaults are 20 degrees and 0 meters above sea level. But if you're at a track, say in Brazil, for example, where you're maybe 800 meters above sea level and it's really hot, you can see that just the environmental data, the environmental conditions effectively have made the air density less because it's higher up and it's hotter, and we've actually been able to add like 10 kilometers an hour just by being at a different track, in terms of its its height and the temperature. So in an ideal world, you would then re-optimize for that. Okay, so you just re-optimize based on the faster speed. Now in this case, we haven't done for the speed. So if I just put in let's say 190 theoretically, now we wouldn't get there because we can't go that fast. But if I do solver, there you go, and you'll see all this move now. Okay, can you see it's just extended a little bit more, and that's going to enable us to get just that up much closer to that top speed. One of the things you'll notice is that these gaps are kind of indicative. The way in which the sheet works is it actually takes a trend line off these curves, so the trend line isn't exactly matching each one of these. It's very close. It's a fourth order polynomial. It's pretty close, but you'll see when you really get into the detail that you'd expect these lines here to really be crossing, and they are for the trend line, but they're just not in reality for this power curve. So just bear that in mind. So maybe it's sort of 7, 8 out of 10 versus guessing, which is 2 out of 10. This is sort of 7, 8 out of 10 with the knowledge that you could actually do it better as well. So that's really all there is to it. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a big version of this chart here on a separate tab, so you can really look at it and say, okay, that's, zoom in and have a good look at it. You've got all the workings are here, so they're laid out in a reasonably nice way. So you can sort of work your way through and see, right, this is the air density, this is the drag, etc., etc. I've got a little list in here of things that I've done, and then maybe things to think about for the future. this is the working section that was there before. It's just updated with the new information, and some other stuff on the changelog. So ultimately, the aim is to give you a lot more confidence that you've got a reasonable set of ratios to use for whatever track you're at, in varying conditions, varying tyres with varying types of car. So hopefully you'll be able to use this for any type of car and any type of track and any type of tyre really, and it will basically be able to optimize exactly the ratios you need given these the constraints that you want to put in. I would start off without the limits and then gradually add the constraints as you feel comfortable, or you may be able to go out and drive the car and say, actually no, I'm not happy with that, so add an extra constraint in at that point. So there we go. That's how it works, and wishing you the best of luck with your gear ratio optimization.